bit more cozy lecture. Today I want to talk about expanding the game economy, but in order to do that, I guess we'll do a little bit of exercise to kind of get like what we actually want to expand. Just so you know, name's Jakub Remiar. I've been working in the industry for 9 years now. We ran this podcast, maybe you heard about it. We always do this test, like how many people in the audience actually listen to the podcast, if you can raise your hand. Okay, that's great. Thank you. You read the right one. And yeah, we also have a Slack channel for whoever kind of want to engage in our community or ask questions there. It's like more than 1,200 people now, so it's kind of getting pretty big. But yeah, enough of that. Regarding hybrid casual, last time I was looking at hybrid casual numbers-wise, it was somewhere like October, September last year. I just had like 4 hybrids that were able to do more than 1 million revenue IAP per month, which means that they're doing at least 33K a day in IAP only. Next time I look at it is this February. I talked about this on like last month when I was here in Istanbul also. And there's actually now a full list of like 10 games that you can see there, which are doing more than 1 million something regarding IAP revenue, that we could say that those are hybrids. Of course, starting with something like Survivor.io, which still sits there on the top. It's like doing something like 400K a day. But then we have a lot of new entrants that's been pretty much put into the chart, some such as like, you know, Alien Invasion, Mob Control, We Are Warriors actually, Archero, and so on and so forth. So there's actually a lot of hybrid games that are currently popping up into these like bigger ones. We still don't have like the giant hybrids like Survivor.io, but I don't think so we ever will. It will be more of a like collection of these small hybrids on companies' game portfolios. But by the end of the year, it will probably completely consolidate, that it will be very hard to do hybrid casual games anymore, because the overall spend of revenue, like there's not enough players in the market probably by the end of the year. If this list will probably grow like double or triple the size, but then we kind of run out of players' money, because with hyper-casual games, you could play 20 hyper-casual games at once, it's okay, because what you watch ads, you have the time, da-da-da. But with hybrids, you need to support the game with your wallet and buy stuff in it, and you can't do that for 20 hybrids, you can do that for 1 or 2 hybrids. So it will consolidate quickly. To that exercise, so if we want to enlarge an economy, let's talk about spend depth. And what's spend depth in like game design terms? Spend depth is, I would say, the definition you could say would be the total amount of money a user can spend in the game until there's nothing else to spend for. That could be like the basic thing you could imagine. The problem is that this is not usually what happens. This is just the number somewhere. It's about the effective spend depth. Effective spend depth is a specific set of resources or heroes, characters, levels, whatever, something that you need to have in order to get to the end of the game. And mostly, a lot of games, you don't need everything literally to buy everything to get to the end. It's just a set of things that you need in order to get to the end, which is enough. And this is your effective spend depth. So let's say in Clash Royale, it could be just that one deck of fully upgraded 8 characters. You hit the last arena, last league, last ranking, whatever, you top 1, you don't need all of them upgraded. Effective spend depth is just the spend depth of those 8 cards, or in, I don't know, Empires and Puzzles, could be your 5 heroes in your team. Survivor.io, it could be like all those, like 6 slots of your weapons. Again, you see the full inventory here, you don't need to upgrade that, that's your effective spend depth. How do we actually calculate effective spend depth? So let's get to the numbers. Usually how you do these things, that all economies within games are anchored on 2 values, all of them, time and money. Every other economy that you can have can be anchored to these 2 values. Everybody has the same. So how do you anchor the money is that you look at your hard currency prices into the store. Some games don't have hard currencies, they just have soft currency or one currency, or they don't have even any currency, they could be just running on ads. Depends, then it gets a little bit more complicated because it's about the level design of the game and how many levels, content, time. We're more moving to the time value. But if we take something like a hybrid casual game that they usually have kind of fleshed out economies, we end up with something that has an anchored currency, which means there's a direct amount of dollars equaling the hard currency. So what we do, we literally take the best value out there is. This is again an example that I'm using for Clash Royale, where the biggest pack of gems that cost around $100 gives you 0.007 of a dollar per gem, which is the best price because it has the discount, like the value discount, whatever. So this is the base value. So what we do then, this is the hard part, we actually need to count all the things that we can buy. So in Clash Royale case, we take all the cards, all the rarities, all the upgrade costs of the cards, of the gold, of soft currency, and count it up. And processing. By the way, secret tip, if you're looking for a spend depth of a game that you don't run, or like it's a competitor, look into the community Reddit, community Discord, or somewhere there on the internet. Usually players do these things themselves. Like there, if the game is big enough, I can guarantee that within 10-minute search on the internet, you can probably find an Excel sheet that somebody did where they count the spend depth. It's usually normal for players to do that. So yeah, if we do this process for Clash Royale, this is some kind of all the calculation because now they have much more units in the game, so it's not 104 anymore. But we get to the total value when counting soft currency for upgrades, card for upgrades, $20,000. That's the total value. If we move then to effective spend depth of, let's say, a deck that I just created from 1 common, 2 rares, 3 epics, 2 legendaries, it's 8 cards, therefore it's just 2,000. So you see the big difference there, that the effective spend depth was just $2,000, the overall spend depth is 20,000. Of course, it's not really the case here where, like, if I just upgrade this deck, I can get to the end of the game, because throughout the life cycle of the game, I maybe switch cards, I upgraded this one, then I change it for the other one, so some amount of money went to this other card, blah, blah, blah. But just for simplification, this is like a rough estimate how these things are calculated, so you know, for next kind of example. Genres have their specific spend depth. Roguelite RPGs like Survivor.io, it can be kind of pretty straightforward. With Candy Crush, you have a level-based spend depth, which is not that straightforward because now we are talking about some completely different progression. With Social Casino, again, it's again completely different progression. So it really depends on the genre. Mid-core RPGs or RPGs themselves are usually easy to calculate. That's why I'm using it as an example. But I also have like few examples of hybrids that are not RPGs. One, again, secret tip, Forex and Forex games have infinite spend depths. If you look at what's happening currently with Last War, Top Heroes, Whiteout Survival, and all these other games, they literally have infinite spend depths with their loops because they work on the premise of destruction of property, which means that, let's say, it's all about, in the end, this kind of giant clashes of clans on the map, and you have your soldiers and stuff, and those soldiers can literally die. You invested resources into them, money into them, you upgraded them for weeks, and then you go to this giant battle, and your hospital's not big enough to kind of accommodate all the wounded soldiers, so you lose them. So you literally lose value. That's why it's an infinite spend depth economy. You can pour so much money into it, and it still is not enough. So just an example of how economies works like it, and why these games are making so much money. So if we take Survivor.io, let's look at how they extended their economy, actually. So the game launched in August with 6 slots as the main kind of progression of the game. So you have, you know, the weapon here, the armor, belt, gloves, blah, blah, blah. These 6 slots, they are just basically scaling HP and damage. That's it. And immediately, after the first month, the guys probably at Hobby, they saw that like people are getting very fast to the end of the progression. So what happens if your players are getting to the end of the progression, you add more layers of progression. So what they added immediately was these tech parts, which pretty much double the inventory of the game. So suddenly you don't have 6 slots, you have 12 slots. And these parts are actually complementary to the equipment that they already had, so it wasn't that much new functionality. For instance, you see here whatever energy diffuser, Molotov weapon fire will now spread instead of just be static. So it's completely complementary to the set that they already had, but the upgrade cost, and you see the, again, HP and damage that they're scaling it doubled literally from day to day. If we move forward, same happens when they added the pet layer. It's again the same thing. So we had one layer, the other layer, and now people are out of that, so we add another layer. So we had the pet thing with, again, skills, attack, and HP. Later down the line, of course, what happens, they added outfits into the game, so you could have some kind of a cosmetic property, but also they are scaling again damage and HP. And suddenly, if we look how it actually looks from game economy spend dev perspective, so let's say the base inventory could have effective spend dev of 10K, then we added the tech parts, another 10K, then we added the pets, another 8K, then we added the outfits, 6K, and therefore we have this monster economy now, which is quadruple the size or triple the size of what was the original economy, as we added more and more progression layers into the game, so people have more and more stuff to kind of buy. But, and very important but, it needs to be supported by the game's content. It's not really something that, let's say, if we would use the same progression vector here for like the power progression, the content would be trivial as it was built like 3 years ago. So on one side, you're adding progression layer, where, okay, you can now upgrade to 5 more levels, you have this other inventory that you need to upgrade. On the other hand, you're adding enemies and scaling the content of the game. So now the game has, what, 140 chapters now probably. It started with something like up to 30 or 50. So you need, like, it's like a scaling Excel sheet basically here that you need to put both sides in it. Otherwise it won't work. And this is the problematic part because usually if you just increase the numbers, I call it like lazy design, it's easy. Everybody can do like scaling Excel sheet. But it's about the functionality and behavior that you produces that gives the game the flavor, the fun part. Because everybody can, you know, like in World of Warcraft, like suddenly you're doing 10,000 damage, next expansion you're doing 20,000 damage, next expansion 50. They actually had to lower the numbers at some point to cut the zeros because they were too big. But it's not only about adding more numbers, it's about the functionality. Like we talk with the tech parts here, where the tech parts actually, if you look at the effects here, they produces new behavior. So you have now new toys to play with, new toys to theory craft, new builds for, new strategies, new enemies to tackle with these builds, so on and so forth. It's kind of a very natural, but this is the hard part to build into the expansion. The other problem is the content bloat that you need to be kind of careful about because suddenly the game works completely different on the end game. Like if you start the game like this, okay, it was nice, but now it's a completely different experience because you have what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 additional layers of power progression that you need to manage. At some point it will become a problem because it cannot go infinite because suddenly you need to manage, I don't know, 8, 7 inventory, so on and so forth. So you need to also be careful about the life cycle of the game at some point if you expand too much. It's good to expand, but sometimes it's too much in a way that it's rather better to either build the second game or do some kind of a reset progress. A good example would be, for instance, Clash of Clans. What Clash of Clans did, instead of building a second game, they built a second city, which effectively means they build a second game within their game, probably because of the brand and the algorithm, and the problem with mobile games that every consecutive game is usually worse than the first. So there's many ways how to do these things. Again, it's very heavily dependent on your genre. Each genre takes different things. Which brings me to some other hybrids on the market, like Mob Control, for instance. Mob Control started as a successful hyper-casual game. This is how actually the game looks when it was kind of scaling on hyper-casual side. Very, very easy, very simple, just 3 upgrade buttons, no ad offer, options, that's it, nothing to it. That's it, that's the whole game. So suddenly what Voodoo started doing was experimenting with other progression mechanics, and they actually added the visual progression, which is literally just the visual, nothing else. It doesn't affect anything in the gameplay. You have these, whatever, brick points, let's call them. You get brick points at the end of each level, and you slowly unlock the picture here, and then comes a new picture, like this one. That's it. But they put it into the PvP mechanic. It's basically like a streamlined version of something that Coin Master does, or Monopoly Go, or all these idle social casino games where you're building this kind of visual progression. Other people can come in, destroy your visual progression, blah, 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 blah. Again, they added it into the loop. It was not enough, so what they add was a gacha system on top of it. So instead of these 3 static upgrade buttons, now they have a fully fledged gacha system where you have, I don't know how many tokens, probably much more when I was taking the picture, where you can now select different tokens in the gacha and use them in your deck, as you would do in Clash Royale. But again, that would also mean then the mechanics of the levels changed, because now they need to support these tokens. which is like one of the big problems with gachas, that you can't just build random characters here and expect people to use different ones. There needs to be problems and challenges built into the level design so these characters has meaning. There's a usual Charmander, Pikachu, Squirtle, fire element is this, ice element do this, so on and so forth. So it needs to go hand in hand, otherwise we won't get any spend depth. If we don't do the level side progression, what will happen? People will just upgrade one of each, and that's it. And you cut the spend depth, you cut the progression, you cut the content, and the game's dead. Going forward, this is a level-based hybrid, which is the Blockjam 3D game, which, if I remember correctly, the rumor is it's making actually more money on IP side than ad side these days. And you can see the same visual progression that they applied here, but their economy works completely different. They don't have like HP damage, power progression system. It's all based on level design. So basically what the game needs is a giant amount of levels that people can go through, and then this is their spend depth basically, like how much time it takes people on free-to-play side to get from level 1 to level 100, level 500, level 1000, so on and so forth. That's their spend depth. And you can check the spend depth based on like the level progression, the boosters, how fast you're going through the levels, how much you're kind of blocking them. Their whole live ops is based on something like Royal Match, where you have these kind of trigger events that are popping on the left side of the screen, where you have whatever, suddenly you go into the game, you have like 3 hours to beat other players to get this kind of a reward. It's kind of very easy to do. You don't do any new functionality. It's basically like a trigger event. All the games are currently using it. My guess is these are all bots anyway, so it's completely scripted. That's how it is, but it works perfectly well. If we go forward, again, this is the exact same example where Twisted Tangle started as a hyper-casual hit and then completely shifted their progression to be kind of a more casual game now, and they are making, I think it was something like 100K plus IAP a day currently. So again, if you look at the evolution of the game, what they actually did, they made the progression harder, because they would have like very simple saga progression in the hyper-casual game, and they would have the hard trials and challenges on the side of the game. So what happens, these challenges and the, let's say, the side progression of the game, it was merged into the main saga, so they actually have this hard level, very hard level, whatever pointers for the players, which kind of adapts them to the difficulty and manages the expectation that it will be a difficult level. So at some point, you should maybe use the boosters, which they didn't have before. So now you have something to monetize. Of course, there's the cosmetic part of the game. It's kind of minor. You can still buy stuff with IPs or ads, but yeah, the main thing is the progression got much harder as it was before. Therefore, you have those pain points as typical level-based game where you have relief levels, new levels to teach players, and then frustration levels, which like player frustration goes up because it takes you, I don't know, 7, 8 tries to beat the level, and then you finally beat the level, either you pay or wait out, or I don't know, more tries, and then the cycle continues and goes like this, and you try to optimize the churn curve of your level funnel. Kind of easy. Easy to say, very hard to do. Yeah, last example that I have here is Paper IO 2, which is one of the games that Voodoo is iterating very fast these days. Again, started very, very simple. Literally, the whole menu was just basically this, like the main core gameplay, where you go around, you create these areas, and you can kill other players if they corner them in your area, so on and so forth. But what happened, basically, they added parameters from the boosters that were in the gameplay into like a, let's say, upgrade progression. That's here now. And because we have an upgrade progression, we need some kind of sort of soft currency. So not only you're getting soft currency from the base core gameplay, they also added this idle mechanic into the map progression. So you are slowly getting around the continents, destroying the countries and conquering them, and then, of course, getting the soft currency out of it that you can then upgrade. And some of the upgrades are actually very meaningful, like, for instance, the next lives upgrade, where like 50K coins, you can have one more life without seeing an ad, which is like completely change of life quality in this game. But it's just, let's say, one of the things that they're trying, because, of course, Paper IO like quadrupled their downloads from last year, they increased their revenue, but still it's very small compared to something like Mob Control or Blockjam 3D. This game, I think, is making like 15K a day regarding IPs, but ads, they're definitely making much more, like much more. So it's still mostly driven by ads anyway, but again, you see that Voodoo is currently trying like different progressions in different games, and what will happen is that once they figure out the progression that works in their game, like they did here in Mob Control, they immediately try to reuse it in other hyper games. Like here in Block Jam, it's basically the same progression. And what is happening, and will happen more and more these days, is that we'll get to the point that these giant hyper-casual companies or publishing houses will start to reuse their old hyper-casual games and hybridize them all the way. Because you have games like Whole.io, you have games like Helix Jump, which has billions of downloads, literally, like amazing games, amazing day one retention, but the economy, the progression, anything else is not there. So what's currently happening, in my opinion, there's like 5 teams sitting in Voodoo that are trying like 5 different metagame progressions on Whole.io core gameplay. Same goes for Helix Jump. Like, I can guarantee that this is happening, and it will happen more and more as we go, because the edge that you have here is that you don't need to invent the core gameplay from scratch. You already have the day one retention, but it's very hard to pair with like a good metagame progression, because not all metagames fits the other genre. It's more of a something like this. You need to customize it and make it sure that it works for your game. If we take something like Block Jam 3D, of course, it was much easier probably for Twisted Tangle to hybridize their progression, because they already see like a working hybrid in Block Jam 3D. But with something like Whole.io, I don't think so there's a market reference that somebody from Voodoo can just literally take and like, okay, let's use this. It will take some time. The moment they find it out, then it will be easier for everyone. That's why I'm saying this whole thing from the beginning, that by the end of this year probably we'll have much more hybrids, as the hybrid know-how will be more and more public, more and more open, more successful games. Therefore, it will be very hard to do hybrids and get into the hybrid genre anyway. Last thing I want you to remember is that hybrids are actually a transition, not an end goal. And this is happening more and more as we see on the market, that in the end, Blockchain 3D will become probably a fully fledged casual game, and they will lower and lower the ad ratio of revenue as they go. Same will probably happen with Mob Control. Mob Control, in the end, as it kind of evolved from hyper-casual to hybrid casual game, will probably turn into a completely mid-core game as it goes, and won't stay in this kind of hybridized state forever. Last time we had Alvaro, from the VP from Voodoo, on our podcast. He literally told us that it will become a mid-core game eventually. Because, for instance, last time I counted, just the spend depth for the gold upgrades for all the cards they have here is something like $30K, without counting the cards in the game. So they already get there on their way, like completely turning game to mid-core, which is okay. It's like all the, let's say, the new strategy in Voodoo is that all the teams are internal, and all the product know-how stays within the company, which was the complete opposite of what was before, where all these hyper-casual publishers would have all the external studios sending them the prototypes, the games, the product know-how, and they would just have the publishing, the UA, and analytics know-how. Nowadays, it's completely turning like on its head, where the product know-how is staying within the hyper-casual, now hybrid casual company, and they are switching to be much more product focused. You could see just by the hires that Voodoo does that they're getting like ex-King, ex-Playrix, ex-Zynga guys there who have very high product know-how, which they didn't need before. So that's there. And yeah, I think we can end it there if there's any questions. As I said, feel free to join our Slack. It's right there. Thank you very much. Any questions? I think we have still 5 minutes. Yep.
So, what type of studios do you think, like you see moving forward from hybrid? So, what type of studios do you think would transit from hybrid to pure casual games? Particularly, I'm talking about the studios which actually have worked over time on hyper casual. What do you suggest? What's the path for them to transition into a casual studio from hyper casual and hybrid casual?
To transition from hybrid to casual or mid-core or whatever, like the next evolution, you need to have a working hybrid in the first place. So you first need to master the step from hyper-casual to hybrid casual, because hybrid casual is not that hard yet as the full casual or mid-core. But if you want to really move, like the example here with Voodoo, you're probably already doing it because if you are successful in hybrid, you're on their way. So my guess is those studios are already there, those ones that have a hybrid. It's more of a bigger problem to go from hyper to hybrid, because that is a giant step in expertise that the studio need to master regarding the product know-how, metagame systems, economy, IAP monetization, progression, data-driven design with all the analytics pipeline. You know, you're not really caring anymore about your like first session seconds, like usually hyper-casual studios do. You care much more about your day 7, day 14, day 30 retention, features that impact the metagame, the progression, the economy, the like side loops and stuff. And this is completely different know-how. So I guess if you're already on that step, you are like going there anyway. It will kind of merge. But for me, the best kind of recommendation is that try to look how the hybrids, the ones that are successful on the market, these ones, if we go all the way up here, these ones, how they looked before. That would be my like #1 recommendation. Try to look how, let's say, Mob Control looked before. Try to look how We Are Warriors looked before, or like how they're can eat, or Heroes versus Hordes also is a good example. Some of these games are hybrid casual from the bat, but for instance, Pocket Champs, they also changed their economy heavily. Try to look at the older builds of the games when they were still kind of hyper phase, and then look what changed. That could be like the best thing I can give you.
Yeah. Thank you.
No worries. Any other questions? Oops, this one. You're good? Okay. Thank you very much. Again, if you want to see more, feel free to join our channel or check the podcast.